Welcome to another episode of the Voyages of Arthur. In this episode, we go to my nephew's wedding in Sweden, which was, after all, the main reason for our journey. We cross the Baltic into Estonia, where we visit historic Tallinn, take part in a kitesurfing race in Parnu, and kite one of the world's best flatwater kite spots at Hardamester. Just to recap, we set off from Dover in our motorhome Arthur in July, and headed through the Low Countries, then up the North Sea coast to Germany, Denmark and into Sweden, visiting kite spots along the way. The aim was to attend my nephew Leo's wedding to Elin in Skövde in Sweden. Let's start with the build-up to Leo and Ellen's wedding, which kicked off with a dip in the local pond, followed by an impromptu ABBA cover band. The main event was the next day at Farnham Abbey. What a wonderful day. A beautiful bride, a handsome groom surrounded by loving friends and family. You couldn't ask for better. Brings a tear to the eye, doesn't it? When we started planning this trip, the question was, where can we kite surf after the wedding? The Baltic sounded, well, suitable. People joke about kiting in Baltic conditions, but we wondered if it really was that cold in summer. So we used Surfer and Woo to figure out where people kite on the Baltic. And fairly quickly we zoomed in on a few spots in Estonia that looked, well, pretty awesome actually. One in particular, Hardamester, looked perfect, and we connected up with Trina Trey, who is the spot queen and pretty much the face of kitesurfing in Estonia. She said August could be okay, the wind comes and goes, but it might be worth a try. So we booked a ferry from Kapellskär in Sweden to Paldiski, Estonia, planning to drive back through the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, and kitesurf as much as we could along the way. When we arrived in Estonia, we gave Trina a shout on Woo, and she messaged back to say, yep, there'll be wind later in the week. So we spent a bit of time looking around the capital city, Tallinn. Tallinn's a fascinating and beautiful city, quite a lot of history, especially with their neighbours. The first spot we decided to kite was a place called Parnu in the Gulf of Riga. We asked Trina what she thought, and she replied, yep, it's on later this week, but it might be quite busy because there's a race on, a kitesurfing race. To which I replied, well, do they have a seniors class? Trina said no, but I said we might come along anyway. So we headed for Parnu and stopped first to look at the Soviet-era prison camp at Rumu on the way. This is where dissidents, criminals and people who were just out of favour with the regime or who pissed off somebody in authority were sent in the Soviet occupation. It's not very nice. Parnu, on the other hand, is where I suspect a good party member would be rewarded for their loyalty with a nice holiday at the beach. Now it's a pleasant seaside resort with wide boulevards and a kitesurfing club, run out of a few containers at the end of the beach with a bar next door and what have you. We rocked up and parked nearby, and the next day we woke up and it was on. So we paid the €30 entrance fee and were given a briefing in English very kindly. The race would be 2 laps from buoy to buoy, just a bit of fun. There was time for us to go out and practice and get used to the conditions while the other riders had their briefing in Estonian, of course. Well, when we got out there, the conditions were pretty rugged. It was really windy and the sea was really choppy. And we don't ride a lot in heavy chop. Fairly quickly, Susan lost her board and decided to sit the race out. I felt somebody had to keep the side up for us Kiwis, so I swapped down to Susan's kite and I went into the actual riders briefing, and the first problem I noticed was that the marker boy for the bottom marker was sitting outside the club room door. They had tried to set it, but it was so rough the dinghy was nearly rolled over. What I didn't know was that they changed the course somewhat as a result of this, and the instructions were no longer the same as the ones that I'd been given. When the race did eventually start, I missed the start flag. So I started last, way behind everybody else, doing my absolute best to catch up in very, very choppy conditions, and it was really hard on the body. Before I even got to the bottom mark, everyone else had turned around and was coming back towards me. So after dodging them, I still couldn't find the bottom mark. I think they may have replaced the big boy with a little one or something. And I couldn't find it to save my life anyway. So I just waited until everyone else had turned and turned myself back to follow them. Next minute, everyone was coming back towards me. So I'm thinking, fuck me, I really am losing this race rather badly. So I kited up to the top mark, and I thought you had to pass upwind of it. Susan was filming me, and she couldn't believe that every time I got close to the mark, I turned and went the other way. But I was just trying to tack around it. Well, eventually I got there, so with one last jump for victory I decided I'd done my bit for the Kiwis. Well, that was just about it for Parnu. We did meet up with Trina, and she suggested we head for Hardamester as it would be working that afternoon and much flatter water. So we piled all our gear into Arthur and set off down the road, only about 30 kilometres to Hardamester. Found a place to camp, and eventually we found where the spot was. Always a bit tricky finding your way into a new spot. Found a place to park, wandered in, bit of an interesting walk in. And this was an absolute flat water paradise, possibly one of the best spots we've ever been to. Trina turned up that afternoon and said hi. And that evening in camp, I got a WhatsApp message from her. Oh, by the way, I've got Susan's prize. She came third in the women's. So I said, well, hang on, she didn't even start the race. Trina said, that doesn't matter. She entered and there were only 3 women, so she's been awarded 3rd place. So meet Susan, 3rd place in the first Parnu International Kitesurfing race. Thanks, Trina. Thanks everyone at the Parnu Surf Club. And thank you, Estonia. Long live free Estonia. And now to finish off, here's some shots of us cruising around the lagoon at Hardamester with music by Greta Paya, Estonian #1 hit singer-songwriter.
Kaugused silmapiir looklevad me ees. Ma rendin ennast sinule nädalaks või kauem veel, roadtrip ootab ees. Mu kaelas ripub talismann pühakust Sebastianist, käes vibunooled reas. Ei šaakalid, ei teemonid, me teele jääb, kaitseb ta, vaid looda, et sul veab. Läbi tuhandete miilide, tunned, kuidas elu voolab sees. Läbi äikese tormide, see, et riskida San Sebastian